Hi, everybody. Welcome to the virtual Red Bench. I am Abby, the director at the Vermont Ski and Snowboard Museum. The museum is a nonprofit organization and relies on the generosity of our members, donors, and sponsors. The Red Bench Speaker Series is an opportunity that could really make a difference to the museum financially. Last year, only 11% of our viewers supported the series with a donation. We're grateful for everyone's interest in the series, for everyone that tunes in, for everyone that donates, and for our sponsors for making this possible. And as long as these are virtual, we hope to keep them free, but we also hope to increase our donation percentage. A small donation may seem inconsequential, but I assure you that it makes a difference. As the saying goes, small drops of water fill lakes, oceans, and rivers. With that said, please consider making a donation tonight if you haven't already. Your donation helps keep this series going, but it also helps support our physical location. And as a thank you, we'll be raffling off 2 pairs of Darn Tough snow socks. Each donation in increments of $10 will be entered, and I'll draw the winners tomorrow. And as an added bonus, Stratton has generously added a dozen Stratton calendars to this raffle. So there will be 14 lucky winners tomorrow, so make those donations tonight. We owe a great deal of gratitude to our Red Bench series sponsors. I want to thank our silver sponsor, RK Miles, our bronze sponsors, AJ Ski and Sports, Scholler Textile, Sisler Builders, and our media sponsor, Vermont Ski and Ride. Without their support, this series would not be possible. So tonight we're celebrating Stratton's 60th winter. We've gathered a panel of Stratton insiders to share their stories. Moderating tonight's event is Kimet Hand. Kimet has been involved with Stratton in many different capacities for over 50 years, starting as a skier, then a main office employee, working for the Golf Academy, transitioning into marketing and events. She's been involved in so many programs and initiatives that I can't list them all, but with that experience and longevity comes a deep institutional knowledge that makes her perfect for tonight's event. We will be answering audience questions at the end. So if you have questions, type those into the Q&A box. You'll find that at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many of those after the discussion as we can. And you can see that Kimet is not alone on the red bench tonight. So I'm officially handing this off to her to make those introductions. So thank you, Kimet. The floor is all yours.
All righty. Thank you, Abby, so much. Thanks to Carson Thurber, who's the head of school here at Stratton Mountain School, for this beautiful venue. We're in the Patty Kaltz's Arts Building, and we are very grateful to Poppy Gall, who's the co-chair of the Vermont Ski Museum, who came up with this wonderful idea and talked us into doing this tonight. A lot of people in Manchester remember Poppy. She was a local gal back in the day. I'd also like to tell you how proud we are of the Stratton folks who were inducted over the years in the museum's Hall of Fame. These are all familiar names to many of you, I'm sure, starting with Wendy Cram, then Amo Henrich, Sverre Caldwell to my right, Paul Johnston, of course Ross Powers, another Stratton Mountain School alumni, and Donna and Jay Carpenter. All pretty well-known names for sure. So much of our history over the years at Stratton has been really beautifully captured by one gentleman, Hubert Schriebel, who everybody at Stratton knows, and it's Hubert, not Hubert. He is the recipient of the museum's Paul Robbins Journalism Award, and he did a beautiful book that is still available. It's called Stratton's The First 50 Years, and it is a stunning collection of his photography. And if you would be interested in one of those, you can just simply email marketing@stratton.com to request your own copy if you like. So now to our esteemed panel. I'll start with, I'll start with my good pal, Lee Romano, who is our rock star. He's a talented bass guitarist and vocalist, known to generations of Strattonites as one half of the duo Pure and Simple. Never quite sure if he was the pure or the simple one, but that's one of those hidden Stratton secrets. He is now, more recently, the co-leader with Bill Mensch of the popular Don't Leave band. In his spare time, Lee had a long run at Stratton in the marketing office, and then took the reins of the Stratton Mountain News, which it was called then in the 70s, turned it into that fabulous publication we know now today as the Stratton Magazine. So while Lee is retired from publishing, he still plays some great gigs, and he has Stratton very much in his heart. And he probably skis on this mountain more than anybody in this panel, or in this room. Next is Sverre Caldwell, of the famous Caldwell Nordic skiing family. Sverre is newly retired. I'm not sure what he's doing these days, but I think he joined the fire department. He was a longtime Nordic coach and also the head of school here at Stratton. As an SMS past parent and dad to Olympian Sophie Caldwell, now Sophie Hamilton, as well as his family of talented Nordies. Sverre also set up the very successful T2 program, which he'll talk about a little bit later, at Stratton Mountain School, training the likes of Jessie Diggins, our recent USA cross-country gold medal winner. Next, I get to Seth Boyd, who is on my left, the executive director of the clinic since 2011. And he holds a dual position at Stratton Resort as their risk manager. A Vermont native from Whitingham, Vermont, Seth plays an important role in the ongoing health and safety of all at Stratton, employees and guests alike. He is a solid Stratton citizen and well known for both his care and compassion for clinic patients during their stay at the clinic and long after their return home. And last but not least, who flew in here 5 minutes ago, literally from Colorado, Mercedes-Benz Henrich Ross, who checks all the boxes at Stratton. Benzie grew up with her sister Teenie at their parents' Austrian Inn, the iconic Burton House. A graduate of SMS and UVM, Benzie is now the executive director of Project Bike Tech, a Colorado nonprofit. She got here literally 5 minutes ago due to the great driving skills of her sister Teenie. So let's lead off with our, what we like to call a little bit of a fireside chat, although we don't really have fire, but that's what it is. I may pop in now and again with some questions or some stories because frankly, I have a lot of stories about this place. So I'm going to turn it over to Lee now to tell us about Stratton's founding, kind of the who and the what, because we certainly already know when and we know where. Lee.
Thank you, Kimet. Nice being with you all. Well, it was a grand undertaking and a very unlikely but successful alliance, and it took incredible courage and vision to pursue. Frank Schneider was a force. He was a successful businessman from Greenwich. He was a devoted skier and accomplished sailor. And his family used to take the long 7-hour trip regularly, this long 7-hour trip to Stowe to ski. And on one of his trips back home, he was working his way down Route 7, and he got into the area we call the Vermont Valley, which isn't too far from here, which is kind of the Dorset-Manchester area. And he had the idea that maybe there's someplace closer to home that perhaps he could develop a ski area. So he pursued these thoughts, and at the same time, there was another group doing it. But what Frank came upon was Stratton Mountain. It was at 3,900 elevation. It was in the middle of the snow belt, and that was a real plus. And the Vermont group, as he referred to them, consisted of Malvine Cole, Pro Buck, Bob Wright, Ed Janeway, Luke Crisp, and Tink Smith. And Crisp was a lawyer from New Fame who told Frank about Tink, who was a blogger from South Londonderry, and he referred to him as the canny woodsman, which was a very succinct thing to say. Well, Tink knew that skiing would be good for the community, and he knew it would be good for job creation. Plus, he and his brother Dick had been logging this land since the 40s, and they knew pretty much every inch of it. Tink was a Vermonter, and he also knew how to get people behind the project. And that was a very interesting story. I think you should tell about how Frank and
About the hydrant. Yeah, there was an infamous story of the Frank and Jesse's first bushwhacking, and Jessie was quite a partner with Frank. She was probably bushwhacking first, and Frank was following her. But it had a very late ending. Apparently what happened, the Snyders took off from near Pearl Buck's house, which is called Forest Haunt, off of Taylor Hill and Pikes Falls Road. They left about 2:30, headed up to what is now Stratton Lake to the summit. Their trip was all trees, creeks, bushes, and rocks. There was nothing, there was no trail there at all. They just made their way. Malvine Cole, who was part of that early group, waited patiently for their return. At 11 o'clock, she frantically called Tink in South Londonderry and said, the Snyders obviously need rescuing. Tink, who at that point had not met the Snyders, who were from Connecticut, Tink arrived to start the rescue effort for the City Slickers. But the intrepid Snyders appeared out of the darkness just prior to midnight. Frank declared it a great trek and was convinced that Stratton would make a wonderful ski area. Tink, on the other hand, had some choice words, but as anyone who knows Tink, they could only understand about every few as he spoke in a rapid-fire Tink monologue, always with the ubiquitous El Producto cigar planted firmly in his mouth. But apparently, Tink said, and I quote, better men than Frank Snyder have been lost for days on that mountain. Even with him doing that dumb thing, I liked him immediately. So their relationship was cemented that evening, that midnight at Malvine's. Tink, what a wonderful man. The stout Vermonter, he was well regarded in the town and in the county. And he was called Tinker early on because not only could he drive the bulldozers that he loved, but he could fix them as well. So Tinker and stuck and Tink stuck. He was a golfer, not a skier, but he was a character and absolutely integral to the start of Stratton. That unlikely duo, Frank and Tink, the skier and the golfer, were off and running.
Great story. Another member of that original Vermont group that entered the picture was Senator Ed Janeway. He became a very important player in this group. He was from Londonderry. He knew Tink. He'd gotten to know Frank and liked him very much. And he made sure Frank knew that he was very happy to help any way he could to move this thing along. Remember the Janeways. Ed was a real gentleman and diplomat, and he had the skills to pull people together, which in a case like this would be very important. One of the challenges they faced immediately was dealing with the long access road that would run from Winhall to the town of Stratton, and which would require state permits.
And state money.
And state money.
Don't forget the money.
Yeah, combination of the two. And of course, Janeway, being a senator up in Montpelier, was able to move things along, and he was able to get the permits issued, and which allowed the project to move forward even further. The property that we're talking about was owned by International Paper and St. Regis Paper Company. Tink knew the owners or knew the operators because of his years logging there. And he was able to negotiate a land lease, which was a great start. And there was a very big advantage to this land in that it was private, not public, which meant that it would free Stratton to create residential properties and to have the flexibility moving forward in terms of the development, which was a good thing. The next issue was funding, not a small item. They sold share stocks in Devonshire bonds, and then they included with that 3 season passes and options on chalet lots, which was a very good move in that it began to build a sense of creating a resort community, which pretty much lasts to this day. At that point, they had to work on put together a work road. For those of you that might be familiar with it, Taylor Hill Road runs from Bonneville perpendicular to the current access road. And the work road they built was up off Taylor Hill Road, just past where the current Stratton Golf Academy is. They built the work road to the right, to climb up to the work area so they could start cutting trails. And that has turned into Brazer's Way, which is right out there, as we said, the Stratton Mountain School. And it is a surprise that they ever got it done because it's a steep road. They had to start hiring. They hired a man by the name of Sandy McIlvaine, who's an architect, to build the base lodge. He was a distinguished architect who had experience in resort development, having recently worked at SWA. And so they were trying to figure out the look and the feel, and Frank, having spent many years in the Alps, became very enamored with the entire Tyrolean feeling. And he had happened upon a place called the Jacober House outside of Innsbruck, and he let the architect know that this was what he wanted to build here, hence the building you see. The contract to build the base lodge was $77,000.
Yeah.
Gene Gillis was the next hire. Gene was hired to design the trails, and he ultimately became mountain manager after that. But one of the things that he did, which to this day we all benefit from, is he introduced Frank to Amo Henrich. Amo was from Innsbruck. He had a larger-than-life personality, and he and Frank hit it off. He was hired to start the ski school. He was an excellent, I would call it, expert skier. He was a certified Austrian ski instructor, and he was a musician.
And an artist.
And an artist.
And a woodworker.
And an engineer by trade. So go figure. And so what he was charged with was creating the ski school, which meant ski instructors. Well, the first thing he did was bring over Austrian ski instructors who were also musicians, hence the Stratton Mountain Boys, who have become a nationally known institution and entertained people here for decades. Fast forward a few months, and it's opening day, December 1961. Almost 4,000 skiers arrived that day. 4,000 skiers on opening day. There were 8 trails, 3 from the top, serviced by 3 lifts, and lift tickets cost $6.50. You missed it.
The good old days.
Well, a late Christmas present came that year in the form of a 2-foot snowstorm. You could say that the mountain was off to a good start. And then that was followed by mud season. Kimet.
Yeah, so that first ski season was a huge success, but the access road was at that point dirt. And the 1962 season ended in April with a complete collapse of the access road. And all Stratton skiers and visitors learned the true meaning of mud season in Vermont, because numerous cars were buried in the mud, like buried, gone underneath. That mud was really kind of like quicksand. Hopefully, all the drivers and passengers survived and got out, but it would be a couple more years before the access road was finally paved. Most people who ski Stratton have their own pretty good access road stories, especially though Stuart Coleman of the iconic Coleman's Mobile Gas Station. Stuart and his dad, Elton, have pulled a lot of people and a lot of cars out of ditches over the years, myself included, and perhaps others on this panel. But they were always very kind in not naming any names. So that was the end of the first year of the collapse of the access road.
Okay, good story. So, first year's done. Tink had other dreams. They've been gathering, the prior year they were gathering at the church for makeshift church services at the base lodge. Tink wanted to build the church, and his wife Kay called it the Chapel of the Snows. And many couples over the years have been married there, and I can tell you there are 3 of us, as I look out, who have been married there. And so it's a special part in our hearts, and we appreciate the fact that it's still sitting in the midst of everything that's happened here. The other thing that he wanted to build was his golf course. He got that done. Both projects were completed in 1964, just 3 years from the opening. It's pretty impressive. From the beginning, Tim talked about his mountain men. He wanted to have his mountain men available to work as needed to get the place started. And there are a few of them that come to mind who went on to have long careers here. People like Ralph Rawson, Casey Rowley, and Caldwell, who worked in management, operations, and ski patrol. Well, there's a view as you descend from the crest of the access road down above the golf course that never gets old. Looking across the golf course to the cascading trails from the summit brings a sense of happiness and wonder to anyone who has had the pleasure of living or visiting here. How lucky are we?
I've always thought that, and I think I may have said this in one of the earlier anniversaries of Stratton, because I've been lucky enough to have been involved in the 30th and the 40th and the 50th. I won't have to be here for the 100th, just saying. But I always thought that Stratton looked like somebody put an ice cream scoop at the top of the mountain, and the ice cream melted and the trails came down, because they're beautifully cascading. They're not dramatically at angle in any place.
Spectacular.
And they're really beautiful. But that, speaking of living on Stratton and seeing that view, I'd like to sort of turn it over to our later rival, but happily here, Benzie, to talk a little bit about her growing up here, but also the Austrian impact and influence on Stratton, as well as some of the good memories you have at the ski school, because you had a unique position right at the side of your dad.
Yes, so sadly, the anniversary of Stratton reminds me that I'm old. Exactly how old I am, but Stratton is exactly the same age as me. But just a little note is that my parents were out in California and in South America, and they were hired to work at Stratton, sight unseen by Jane Gillis, and they drove their little Volkswagen bus with me 6 months to a Stratton that barely had an access road and a few trails, and brought, like Kimet said, the Austrian experience to Stratton. So my dad was just so Austrian, and he wanted this place to have that feeling. And so that started with bringing in ski instructors from Austria. I think the first group was all Austrians except for Andy Burton, who was the only American, and all those Austrians lived in the house with us. My mom cooked for them, and they were part of our lives at that point. And those Austrian ski instructors had to play an instrument, because they not only ski instructed, but they did the Austrian Tyrolean evenings every night in the base lodge, and everybody remembers those wonderful evenings. Dad was very much a part of making it a family event. So those ski weeks were super important to him, and making it fun. You know, the Alphorn, the chicken dance, and Kazi on the saw, and Stefan on the Alphorn. Someone was saying, my sister was telling me that he has 6 in his basement right now, Alphorns. And then Otto on the accordion, you know, always he would ask everybody to be a toy knot and Coke for the little ones, right? That was Otto. And Hans Kremser always yodeling wonderfully. And the picture you see here is my mom, actually, and the original Stratton Mountain Boys making wonderful noise on that stage. And it always, you know, the Austrian dirndls I've got one on tonight brought so much Austrian flavor to that. So the mountain really needed to have that Austrian flavor, so all the chalets kind of look Austrian, and the Bear's Den and dirndls and Gemütlichkeit was just a big part of what Stratton was all about. Even the shields on the outside of the building were were of Austrian, I think it was American flags and
American,
Austrian.
no, there were flags actually from all the countries.
All the countries, right.
Because the ski patrol used to have to come in and raise the flags every morning. That was
Really important in the ski school signs, and you know, the three original inns, the Liftline Lodge and the Burton House and Hotel Tyrol, all had an Austrian base, and it was really important to Dad that it was inviting to the family. It was so important for kids to start skiing, and the ski week was so important to Dad. Even, you know, I was really young, but I just remember him making sure that the Little Cup was a place where kids would learn how to ski, and of course Muriel Bowden was a huge part of that, and we grew up with Phoebe and Dougie Bowden, and then Ruthie Rowley ran the Big Cup school, so it was very much the parents went up on the mountain and the kids were taken care of, and that was super important to Dad, and also just the whole racing. So I started racing when I was really young. We had the Pee-wee races. And Kim Reichhelm and I would race and get these wonderful little awards.
Yeah, lollipop. It started with lollipop races.
Lollipop races, right? And of course, all those young racers, the Hellmans, the Reichhelms, and the Hardys, all then started to be part of the Stratton Mountain School later. So that's where that all started. But we also had back then an incredible freestyle program with Stefan Schanthammer and Stevik, and then the Nordic Center was developed. The Eckharts had a big part of that, and then Louis Lechner really embraced, unlike other ski areas, the snowboard, and Jake was here, and so the snowboard was allowed to come to Stratton and not at other ski areas. So, but Dad really, Mom and Dad both wanted it to feel like Austria here, and I think that she did that. And, my sister and I will attest that it was a fantastic place to grow up.
Thank you, Benzie. So one of the things that Benzie touched on, and we all feel pretty strongly about, is the real sense of community here. Stratton became kind of a home away from home for so many families. Now 4 generations with some 5th generation children in the kids' ski school now. A lot of those early chalet owners have passed the houses down to their families, and some of them have been expanded a little bit over the years. But it was all fun and family fun, both on and off the slopes. Another unique thing is a lot of the early homeowners' kids became employees here. They worked at the, a couple of them worked in the Bear's Den, more dirndl and served drinks. Most of them, I think, worked in the ski school. But there was a very close, also at that time, a real close rapport between the Stratton homeowners and the employees, because it was a much smaller group. And we did a lot of socializing, both at things like the Easter Parade, where the Stratton Mountain boys drove the snowcat, or they actually played on the snowcat. Denny Davidson drove the snowcat. Stratton Mountain boys played music, and it wasn't just the homeowners who were dressing up in costumes, it was the employees as well, and everybody kind of did it all together. They also, the early ski balls were pretty much Stratton homeowners and Stratton employees. It wasn't until later, when the school was developed, that the parents got involved in that. We also had some really lovely ladies on the mountain who were related to the trio of Tink, Frank, and Ed, and that was Jessie Snyder, Kay Smith, and Eleanor Janeway, and they set out to bring all kinds of cool things to the mountain. Besides Kay pushing for the Chapel of the Snows, the Stratton Arts Festival was a big part of our life in those early days. And Jessie really set the tone, I think, for the early social life on the mountain, because in the beginning days, all the homeowners were invited to the Snyder's house. I don't know if you ever got to go, but it was, yeah, you weren't ready for the glue wine. No. But they all went to the Snyder house at Christmas time, and Jessie had dressed in her dirndl, and they had glue wine and wine and cheese, and it was like the social event of the season. The ski balls, the early ones, first one was in 1969, and that was managed by Peggy Lord and Eugenie Graff. And they brought, oh my God, Peter Duchin or some fancy dancing New York band, and that raised money for the junior ski race program. And a lot of people wore what they call high Austrian formal wear. It was very low jackets and all kinds of things. It was lovely.
Hubert has all that stuff.
Yes, Hubert has all that pictures. Then we had sort of more families coming. Birch Hill and the Stratton Mountain Chalet co-ops were developed by the Chalnaki brothers in the late 60s, and that brought many new families to the mountain. That was followed by the condos in the later 70s. First condo development was Shadrach, brought a whole new wave of families, still mostly Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Westchester, some Boston, a lot of West Hartford, and those folks stuck around for the summer, and they're the ones who supported John Newcomb and his crazy band of Australian legends of tennis, and later the Volvo tennis tournament, which brought some really special players like Lendl and Becker and McEnroe, and I think it was the breakout appearance for Andre Agassi at that. One of our homeowners at Stratton, Chuck Townsend, who was the head of McCall's Magazine, brought the LPGA here for 5 years, and they kicked off and started a really important community event, the Vermont Race for the Cure, which continues to this day in a slightly different fashion. Lee referred a little bit earlier to the chapel, but hundreds of couples have met or married at Stratton over the years. It means too many to count. Some in the chapel, as Lee and Susan did, and some at the summit. And today, the deck at Hubert House is a popular spot for couples to get married in the winter. Sometimes I just have to shovel off all the snow, and the bride goes up on the gondola, and it's stunning. Also, the homeowners at Stratton have really been supportive over all these years of the mountain nonprofits, and that includes everything from SMS to the clinic to the Stratton Foundation, the chapel, and the fire department. There's always been an incredible amount of generosity on the mountain. One of the great community functions that we have here now every 2 years is the Emil Henrich Award. Benzie knows what that's about, and so do some of the people on this panel. It was started by the Stratton Corporation in 1988, and it continues today to honor people who have made a lasting impact on the Stratton community. And several Henrich Award recipients were intimately involved over the years in the Carlos Otis Clinic, including Bill Simmers, Dr. McCausland, Mary Beth Hand, the Ski Patrol's Casey Rowley and Denny Davison, King Wright, and our next panelist, who will talk a little bit about the Otis Clinic, Seth Boyd.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here with this little non-fireside chat that we're having with you guys. I'm not sure how I qualified to be here, but I do appreciate the opportunity, and I'm honored to speak about the Otis Clinic, which is the mission that's very near and dear to my heart. And, some people in the community here that make it that way. And as Lee talked about in the beginning, it was a grand undertaking. I think when they began to trim the trees on the hill in those first 10 years or so of the operation of the resort, I'm not sure if Frank and Tim thought about what it would produce, which is potentially injured people. And that's where the clinic came in. And even in those early years of long skis, fixed bindings, and short boots that produce broken legs. That's a fact. And as with any sport, there's some inherent risks of injury, and skiing's one of them. So I think they made decisions very early on compared to other resorts around us in the state and across the country that really put them on the map for thinking ahead. And so those broken legs early on, in the 60s would get loaded into, as I envisioned, in the back of their cars, in the back of a mid-60s station wagon and delivered. Although recently learned a story from Kimet, there was a steel gray purse with a purple light on top that Casey Raleigh may have been in command of and taken taken those students and delivered, or taken those patients and delivered them to Dr. Carlos Otis, who founded Grace Cottage Hospital, about 25 minutes away in Townsend, Vermont. And I think after several years of receiving those patients, I began conversations with those founders here at the resort about, well, let's make this more convenient on the skiers. And let's bring the medical services to them instead of delivering them to Townsend where he could take care of them. So it seemed there were conversations with Phil Schneider, Frank's brother, who was very instrumental with Dr. Carlos Otis, and they built a modern medical facility, slope side, which was unheard of in those days. The resort donated land, funds were raised, a board of directors stepped up, and today we still have a very engaged, very supportive board of directors who really steer the ship and allow us to provide the services that we provide. But they built a facility, and along with that, they hired a staff of professional nurses, and one of those nurses was Miss Hand, who would go on to become the executive director for the first 4 years. And it's interesting that as sturdy as the clinic is, there's only been 2 executive directors, myself and my mentor, Miss Hand, who I communicate with on a regular basis to make sure we're doing the right thing. And then at some point, Dr. Otis met Dr. William McCausland, who was a bigger-than-life orthopedic surgeon from Boston. And they created a partnership which served the medical needs and of the injured skiers and just the guests who were here at the resort. And Dr. Mack, as he was affectionately known, began to recruit other physicians, other orthopedic surgeons from Boston. And they gathered several. And it was a pretty good gig even back then, where they would arrive and they would volunteer their time and they would ski when they weren't taking care of patients, and they would spend their time here. So,
just for a
sure.
moment, that's interestingly enough, a lot of those doctors went on, who spent a week here with their family each year, went on to become Stratton homeowners. They came up, they loved it, they bought a place, and they came back, and they were replaced with other doctors who were doing the rotation. It was kind of a brilliant marketing when you think about it.
And they still are.
They still are.
A lot of our doctors are still homeowners. But that heavy representation from Boston also made a connection with Harvard Medical School, and there was a formal rotation set up for training for Harvard medical students to come and learn how to treat orthopedic injuries and cold weather injuries here at Stratton, and that relationship exists today. We still today have Harvard medical students and other medical schools doing rotations. We really have renewed our focus on being a teaching facility more recently. So that is a long-standing historical fact that I'm not sure that is well known. It's just something we kind of do behind the scenes. So over the years, the program grew, the physicians grew, the building grew. They added on to one end of the building, and then eventually they added on to the other end of the building. They added medical doctors to the volunteer rotation roster as well. And then at one point, they added an ambulance service for those who really needed to be transported on to one of our local hospitals. So the ambulance was here today. Again, other resorts still haven't figured this out. And they've had that mindset early in the day to take care of the community, of the guests, and the people.
It's kind of like when you go skiing or snowboarding, you never really want to go and expect that you might get hurt, or you don't want to get hurt. But if you have to get hurt, this is the place to get hurt.
For sure.
Right
You're in good hands.
You've got a great team to care for you, a great facility. It couldn't be more top notch.
Yeah, for sure. So as the facility chugged along and the operations chugged along, and Mary Beth led the team, up until we moved to about 2003. Dr. McCausland, after he passed away, his family's condominium was no longer available for the docs to stay in while they came King Wright, who was a long time president of the board of directors of the clinic, and he spearheaded an effort to build the annex, which is attached to the clinic. And that was stylish accommodations for volunteer doctors. And that in itself secured the efforts to recruit doctors for the future, not just today, but from 20 years from now. That's still going to be an effective portion or part of our program. As the clinic began to age, at 40 years of operation, around 2011, there's a dedicated effort to bring in emergency physicians, as well as the renowned orthopedic physician care. So that's been done. In 2014, we added about a $1.5 million investment to the facility and complete renovation of the existing facility and an addition of patient care space. So again, historical growth, I think, from day one is pretty cool. And,
But it's something we're terribly proud of at Stratton.
Yeah.
We don't like to advertise the medical. It's kind of counterproductive, come learn to ski, but we probably need to move on a little bit because we've got another nonprofit to my right that we don't want to give them any more time. Is there anything we want to wrap up with?
I would like to just wrap up to sort of bring it to today. So where are we today? And I think we're in a pretty cool place where Dr. Otis and Dr. McCausey would be pretty proud. We have our nurses. Some of our nurses within the clinic are ski patrollers. Some of our ski patrollers are certified as EMTs and paramedics, and they operate our ambulance service. Our head of our ambulance service works in the clinic every day. Our clinical manager, Megan Eichhorn, mentored and worked beside her at that hand. So we still instill those values that were very early on in the patient care. And we've created a team and a system of care that you won't get anywhere else. It just doesn't exist anywhere else. So I think that's pretty cool. The synergy between Ski Patrol, our ambulance service, clinic operations, and we're here to support the community. We're here for the programs, we're here for the athletes, we're here for Stratton Mountain School, and we're here for the racing programs that go on. And I just think that
we just hope we never have to use you.
Yeah.
But we're glad that you're here.
There's a great tie to the original history, and talking about the racing programs, I think we
we're going to
some comments around.
Yep, we're going to move on to Lee, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the competitive snowboarding and ski racing on Stratton.
Yeah, thank you. Racing has been a part of Stratton's culture right from the beginning. Amo came from a ski racing background. Many of his Austrian instructors also raced professionally, and they did set the tone for top-level ski racing. In 1963, Stratton hosted their first Stratton Cup. It was the first ever pro series. Stein Eriksen and Ernst Hinterseer were here, and that tradition continued. 1970, the Janeway Cup. It's a master series named after our very own Ed Janeway, Stratton founding father, and is awarded to the fastest men and women over the age of 40. It's been a long-time favorite on the Masters circuit, and has of late been shepherded since Janeway's passing by our own Hubert Striebel. You may have noticed this picture. That's our Herman Goldman. Herman was an ex-racer and freestyle skier who became the first coach at SNS. He went on to become the US ski team's women coach. Around the same time, Fritz Ballant, who was an SNS coach in the early days, went on to become the US ski team's women coach, as well as the Austrian ski team's men's coach. So it goes without saying that there has been serious racing pedigree here at Stratton. This was taken in 1968. This is the Mobius flip. That's a shot Hubert took. Base lodge, mob with table, bottom of sun care. Our own Stefan Schurentiner, who we all know and love, was one of the early freestyle champions. He started the Stratton Freestyle Ski School, and he had the first Eastern Freestyle Skiing Championships. A gentleman by the name of Stephen Kenny, known as Stevick by all of us, took over the program in the 80s and stepped back so he could become the Stratton Mountain Boys family. One of the big events over the course of these years was the 1978 FIS World Cup. It was the first World Cup ever held in Vermont. Steve and Phil Meir won the slalom and GS over Ingemar Stenmark, who went on to win the World Cup championship that year. The women's race was won by Hani Wenzel and Perrine Pellein, who won the slalom. From 1985 to 2012, the US Open Snowboard Championships were held here. That's a 27-year run. There are other things that have happened that are not quite as significant, but one of the things that we here enjoy on a daily basis is the Stratton Mountain School students training on the course. It's on the Stratton slopes, and it continues the ongoing partnership between the resort and the school. One thing I do want to add here is that in 1977, International Paper donated 1,000 acres, which is most of what Stratton sits on, to the United States Ski Education Foundation, which was run by Warren Hellman, excuse me, the second homeowner and co-founder of Stratton Mountain School with Don Taranelli. Taranelli would go on to be Stratton's resort president, and they together negotiated the land donation, solidifying Stratton's importance in the ski racing community. And with that, I'll pass it down.
That actually is a perfect segue to Stratton Mountain School. So we have both, my goodness, a student, a past student, a graduate, a past parent in Sverre, a coach, and a head of school. So I guess you guys know it all. Let's hear about this founding the Stratton Mountain School.
Wow, it's great to hear the history of the mountain and the clinic and see how an idea can grow into such a great endeavor. I worked at SMS from 1980 until 2019, so I'm here as the school's resident historian. I was not here for the first 10 years, so I'll give a brief overview and then ask Benzie to tell a story. In 1970, two avid skiing families, the Hellmans and Taranellis, decided they wanted to be more than weekend warriors. They started a winter tutorial program using their chalets for the program. This allowed their children and other locals to ski and train every day. The idea took hold, and in 1972, the program expanded into a full-time school. 2 years later, the school moved to the Hotel Tyrol, which you see. And in 1976, the school had their first Olympian, Abby Fisher. In 1977, they added a Nordic program. I think T.D. McCormick coached Triland that first year. I took over the program in the fall of 1980, not dreaming of remaining there for 39 years.
You must have done a really good job, Sverre.
We know the feeling.
Benzie, do you have any story to tell us from those early years?
Well, I don't have just one story, of course, but as you're looking at the Hotel Tyrol, the first year that I went to the school, I was one of the youngest students because my mother just decided in 7th grade, even though it started in 8th, that I should be part of the school. And so we were in the basement of that hotel, and there were guests upstairs. And we had the entire downstairs, there were a couple of rooms, and our main library was the bar and the dance floor, and there was a jukebox there, and whenever we had a break in between classes, Richie Ross would go down and push the same button, and we'd listen to Money from Pink Floyd at break every time. I'm sure we're the only school that can say that. But those years were fantastic, and I wouldn't give them up for the world. What a wonderful way to grow up here and be part of the Stratton Mountain School.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. In 1982, the school became the first ski academy to be accredited by NEAC, New England Association for Schools and Colleges. That's a big deal because it put us on the map and made us feel quite important. Although successful, we did have some growing pains, as witnessed by the 7 headmasters over the first 21 years of existence. Everyone wanted success, but each had a different idea on how to get there. We were a young school and we had to figure things out on the fly. Meanwhile, the Hotel Tyrol was getting older. I remember one spring morning heading down to my classroom and encountering water gushing out from the bottom of the stairs. The mountain had put in some new parking lots, and apparently the old drainage routes had been altered. I guess the easiest way to get from the mountain down towards Winhall was through our school. We quickly opened the lower doors in order to allow the water to continue its journey, and we continued with classes. In the late 80s, we were having some renovations done when the school caught fire. Luckily, the fire department did a good job, but the fire forced us to find other accommodations. So we picked up and moved everything to Magic Mountain for the fall. The kids lived in rented condos, and we had classes and meals and base labs. During this time, we moved forward because of the passion and dedication of people like Herman Goldner, Larry Harry, Bill Dunkel, Fritz Gallant, Sue Jedlicka, T.D. McCormick, Len Bugle, and Peggy Stamps. There were many more, but those are the ones I remember as being the glue that held everything together. We didn't always agree, but we were all passionate and we found ways to make things work. In the early 90s, we went through an extensive long-range planning process. From this, we developed clear mission and goals. Our mission became provide an environment that offers each student the opportunity to pursue excellence in competitive winter sports and college preparatory academics while developing strong personal values. I know it's kind of a handful, but it's important. We expected our students to be good athletes, good students, and good people. Having a strong mission helped direct the path forward and unify our community. If our mission was to foster the pursuit of excellence, we needed to work together and we needed to update our facilities. During this time, we added snowboarding. I remember Scott Palmer coming and pitching the idea to me. He assured me that he had some very strong local kids interested, one of whom was Ross Powers. The trustees approved of the idea, and the rest is history. In 1996, Chris Galchis became headmaster and got to work planning a new state-of-the-art campus. Chris was the right person for the job. He led the school for 24 years and managed the construction and move to the new campus. In 1998, Ross Powers won an Olympic bronze medal, the school's first, and then the next year the school moved into the new campus, which you can see, with a Bircher Field House and Luckenbill Field being dedicated to long-term supporters. During the early 2000s, the campus continued to grow. The school added free ski and freestyle programs, and the allocates started piling up. The little dorm and staff apartment building were added, and the Greg and Dell Gymnasium and Strength Area, the Simpson Air Awareness Building, and the Patty Cultus Art Center were all built. This completed the campus master plan. For many of us, this was a dream come true. I remember a parent asking me while we were in the Hotel Tyrol how I could work in such a rundown place. I replied quite honestly that I looked at the students' eyes and not at the stained ceiling. If you see a spark in those eyes, then you're doing something right. That said, when we moved to the new campus and built it to what it is now, I often had to pinch myself to make sure it was real. This really is a top-notch facility. Our current students continue to do great things, and our alums earned 3 more Olympic medals. Ross Powers won gold in Salt Lake. Kristen Luckenbill won Olympic gold in soccer in Athens, and Lindsay Jacobellis won silver medal in Torino. In 2009, SMS was named USSA Club of the Year. Over the last 10 years, we've continued to flourish. In 2010, we added the SMST2 program. This program was designed for older cross-country athletes with a mission of international excellence and local inspiration. We started with 6 athletes, including Jesse Diggins, and SMS alums Andy Newell, Sophie Caldwell, and Skylar Davis. This program, like our others, has been very successful. Our skiers have earned medals at every level, at World Junior Championships, U23 World Championships, World Championships, and Olympics. We've had 5 different skiers earn World Cup podiums, and Jesse Diggins has won 3 Olympic medals. And just today, one of our current students, SMST2 members, Ben Ogden, who grew up in Langrove and went to SMS, won the first race at NCAAs. He was also 12th in the Olympics, and he's getting a degree in engineering at UVM. Heady stuff. In 2014, USSA designated SMS as a gold club, and Alex Diebold won an Olympic bronze in snowboarding. In free skiing, Caroline Clare became our first currently enrolled student to be named to the Olympic team, and Matt Forehand won the Crystal Globe. In 2020, Carson Thurber became headmaster, and SMS was named USA Club of the Year again. Carson is a 2002 alum whose time at SMS spanned both the Hotel Tyrol and the new campus. He knows the history, and I know he will do a great job in the school forward. Last month, Lindsay Jake Bellis won 2 Olympic gold, and Jesse Diggins won silver and bronze. Both are incredible stories, but I don't have to tell them right now. What a 50 years. This school now has 140 students, 27 coaches, 18 teachers, plus an administrative staff. Headmaster Carson Thurber is working closely with Stratton President Bill Nutt to ensure a smooth working relationship for the years to come. We have an amazing college placement record. 51 alums are Olympians, and we have 10 Olympic medals. Who could have dreamt that the idea fostered by the Hellman and Chernelli families 50 years ago would grow into such a strong institution so quickly? It's been an exciting ride, and I can't wait to see what happens next.
Oh, thank you, Sverre. That's great, and we're all so proud of the school and so happy to be actually sitting here in the school tonight as guests. I'm going to talk just a little bit quickly about snowboarding at Stratton and finish up with a little bit about the Stratton Foundation, and we'll wrap it up tonight. So thank you for your patience as we tell you a lot of what's happened over 60 years. Jake Burton, who everybody knows, started here. He worked at AMO's wood shop at night. He started building his boards in Londonderry. He was a local kid who had a vision, and he actually developed an entirely new sport, even though he wasn't the founder of snowboarding. He took a surfer and kind of brought it into now an Olympic sport. Ross Powers got one of those early boards, and you know what happened to him. In '83, Stratton's Paul Johnston, PJ, developed a certification program for us so that people who were skiing, I meant to say kids, but it was mostly kids at that time, who were snowboarding, had to be able to demonstrate to PJ that they could turn and they could stop, and they got a little sticker on their pass, which meant they could use the lifts. That turned into a whole other level of commitment on Stratton's part to snowboarding, the US Open, snowboarding being added to the Stratton Mountain School. To say that it took over is an understatement. But we were happy to have somebody like Ross Powers, a local Londonderry kid, do what he did, and he is now the director of snowboarding here at SMS. And one of his daughters graduated just recently, and he has another daughter at school here now. So I guess the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. If you haven't seen, there's a recent documentary, and I encourage you to watch it if you have interest in snowboarding and Jake, called Dear Ryder. It's a Netflix documentary that really gives the whole story of Jake's involvement in snowboarding. Sadly, we lost him in 2019, but his wife Donna continues at the helm of Burton. This coming Saturday, or Sunday rather, March 13th, is called A Day for Jake, which I think is an annual program, and it's a global day to celebrate his legacy. So we're really proud to have played a part in that at Stratton, the birth of that we call ourselves the cradle of snowboarding. On to the Stratton Foundation. That was started in 1996 with Bob Freeze, who came here with Interwest. Rick Uby, Michael Cobb, Carl Williams, and Christopher Lee were involved in getting that nonprofit going. And we envisioned it as a way to bring the Stratton community together and to do good works. And we had fun and educational events, presenting symposiums on Pearl Buck and the Nearings, both Stratton homeowners. We had ski and social events, house tours, plays, performances. But basically, we developed a welcoming home for the Stratton community members to get involved, meet each other, and to provide support and aid to our surrounding towns and the citizens. We never imagined that the foundation would become a hurricane relief fund. We did that. And while the mission's changed somewhat over the past 26 years, the foundation is still doing a lot of really great work and has become a key part of the Stratton community. Lee's going to give us a couple of quick bullets of some of the more recent contributions of the foundation, and then we'll do a little wrap up.
Sure, thank you. There were some dates that, milestone dates that I think are impressive in terms of realizing just what kind of a difference the foundation has made. By the first year, the foundation awarded $9,000 in community grants, 1996. By 2006, the total had grown to $87,000. As Kimet said, they had established a hurricane relief fund and they were able to raise and distribute over $400,000 to families, businesses, and towns. They had the inaugural 24 hours at Stratton in 2012. A ski marathon event that raised almost $175,000 for the foundation.
And that's coming up too pretty soon.
Yes, it is. It's on the 19th, 20th of this month. Yeah, it's going to be coming up soon. In 2012, the foundation grant totals reached $1 million. It's unbelievable. In 8 years, in 2019, the 24 Hours of Stratton event itself raised $1.4 million, which was to benefit the foundation. And in 2021, when the pandemic hit, the foundation created a COVID relief fund, and they raised over $400,000. And with the Stratton support, they were able to provide 20,000 meals to local families in need. It's just, it's phenomenal. Tammy Moser is the current executive director of the foundation. Their primary focus presently is to eradicate generational childhood poverty in the southern Vermont community. I would like to take a moment, if you will, to recognize Michael Cobb for all that he did in his many years at Stratton. VP of Marketing, co-founder of the Stratton Foundation, creator of the 24 Hours at Stratton. Michael was a driving force in all kinds of regional initiatives, like the Refuse to Use program that he does in coordination between Stratton and the Collaborative. It supports community schools with individual substance use issues among students. Michael is no longer with us, but his impact will be felt for years to come. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. Alrighty, so fast forward to today. Stratton is presently owned by the Altera Mountain Company, and we are one of their 15 worldwide destinations. Stratton has truly become the village that those original pioneers intended, straddling both the towns of Whitehall and Stratton. So in addition to our 11 lifts and 99 trails, Stratton has everything from, and indulge me here because this is a pretty impressive list, 27-hole golf course, chapel, post office, daycare, sports center with an indoor pool, tennis center, fire department, restaurants, stores, and ski shops, groceries, and a liquor store. Liquor store is always an important thing in a resort. Sunhole Lodge, state-of-the-art medical clinic, and a renowned secondary school on a spectacular 8-acre campus that we're sitting on at Stratton Mountain School, and close to 2,000 homes and condominiums, a long way from those original 16 little Austrian chalets that we had on Quarter Mile in North Brookwood. What remains from those early years are a lovely paved access road that's almost 5 miles long. The lone remaining original hotel, Stratton Mountain Inn, which is now, it's still there. It looks a little different, and it's now called the Rising Bear Lodge, but we all still call it the Stratton Mountain Inn. This stunningly simple Chapel of the Snows, which sits there beautifully by itself. Nothing will ever happen to it. The base lodge that grew and grew from this and grew, as you all know. Luckily, they replaced the elevator a few years ago because the elevator was like 50 years old. And I got stuck in it once for 2.5 hours. So I'm glad that they did replace the elevator. But what really remains is a very strong sense of community, tradition, of loyalty, and a love for Stratton. So now Abby will pop back in with some of the questions that you all maybe have been writing in. But our panel thanks you in advance for sharing some of your memories. And we'd like you, if you can, to go ahead and email any photos or memories or stories that you might have about your time at Stratton to marketing@stratton.com. And if you also want to get a copy of Hubert's book, you can ask that at that same email address. So Abby, do we have some questions?
Okay, we do have a few questions. Let me get this open here. Okay, the first one, could you speak about Paul Johnston's role in the US Open?
Ooh, let's see. Could I speak about that particularly? I'm not really a snowboarder, but I do know that PJ had a preeminent role in the US Open was originally not called the US Open, it was at Snow Valley. And when PJ came to Stratton, which was after Stratton bought Bromley, that's how we got PJ. He came over here after 1979. He got very involved. He helped Jake get the whole snowboard scene going, and I'm gathering he was the one who probably pushed with management to host that event and name it the US Open. Beyond that, we'll have to ask PJ. I talked to him yesterday. He said say hi to everybody. He's in Florida, like a lot of old people moved to Florida.
Not a shy bone in the man.
Anything else? Another question?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with snowboarding a little bit. I'll try to keep these so they go in order. Who won the first US Open?
Andy Caldwell and Tom Sims. And I think Tom Sims, I just pulled that right out of my hat.
Yeah.
I think Tom Sims was a sort of a competitor developing his own snowboard. And if you watch that documentary I just said, you can find out a lot about the competition between Tom Sims and Jake Burton. But that's who won the first ones, Andy and Tom Sims.
Okay. When did the US Open first have a half pipe?
Ooh, we know that 1985, 1988. We have Myra Foster from Stratton here who knows everything, so she's helping us. 1988.
And you have Trisha Burns in the chat that knows it too.
When the half pipe first came to Stratton, only snowboarders could use it. No skiers could go in it. It was only for snowboarders. So, you know, it then grew, you know, everything sort of took a little while to just get people to get used to it, for the mountain management to get used to it, for the clinic to get used to it. Snowboard injuries are different than ski injuries. It took a while.
All right. And when did Sean
Your questions.
White win the US Open?
Well, Sean White,
2006, I think it was. That was his first. He won 5 or 6 in a row.
yeah, he actually floor ran the half pipe when he was 9 years old. Yeah, as a little skipper. And I think Burton saw him and kind of said, hey, we're gonna keep our eye on this kid.
A hot tomato.
What was the original name of the World Cup trail?
Ooh,
Lower slow.
Where's-
Testing you guys.
where's Tex writing? He always remembers all that.
That was
kind of
a
stuff.
solid blade.
Lower slow.
And it got changed to World Cup after the World Cup.
Right.
Yeah. So slalom blade, it's like the cars under the access road. Slalom blade is still there under the World Cup, but it's called.
It's half the trails World Cup and half the trails lower slow.
All right. What happened to the Rhineline Trail?
Rhineline
Rhineline
got.
got- It's what?
Well, this is still at the bottom of standard, upper standard. There is a brand line takes you over to the lower, what was North American is now Frank's fall line. Right? Yeah. But it got opened into one trail instead of Rhineline as standard.
It used to be a gnarly GS run down Rhineline.
Well, it was.
You can tell who the skiers are on the panel. The rest of us work, and these are the guys who just actually go skiing.
Oh, come on.
Where did Brazer's Way get its name?
Oh, I can answer that. The Mr. and Mrs. Brazier, Carolyn Underwood's parents, were lovely, lovely people. They lived, their homestead was down on Pikes Falls Road, and Carolyn and her husband, Stuart, were big time, long Stratton employees. Stuart actually ran the whole virtual Stratton Mountain co-ops for the Chalnockies and for Rick Uby. And Carolyn was, she was in charge of all the money and the tickets.
She also worked for her being though.
Yeah, she worked at the LaFline before that, and it was named for her parents, the Braziers.
All right. Who was the architect for the original base lodge?
Sandy McElvain.
He did the
That
chapel
was
as
one of the
well.
first hires. He also helped with the design of the chapel.
And where do the Nordic students train?
Sverre, where do the Nordic skiers train?
They trained at the Sun Bowl. There's some great trails there, and we actually have a trail from the school right out to the Sun Bowl trail, so they can ski right out to the trails and train.
All right. Not a question, but anonymous attendee says, Benzie, I love your dirndl.
You're not covered.
It still fits.
Right. Are there any plans to create or bring back a half pipe for snowboarders or any X Game competitions?
Wow, that's up in the air. As we mentioned earlier, Stratton has a new owner now, and in my history here, sometimes things change when you have a new owner. So who knows? It could be, but we'll have to see.
Right. When did the village get created?
Ooh, early 80s.
Yeah. It was long planned, but it took a while to finally get it going from where the clock tower is down to where it ends currently.
I have the original plan, that is
I know.
and I have it at home.
Who is Craig's Run named after?
Craig Schwartz, who was a lovely man from Weston, who ran our Stratton real estate office back in the day. And he was a wonderful, wonderful individual. Craig's Run was named after him. And of course, we have those other three, for Tink, Frank, and Ed, we have Janeway Junction, and we have Tink's Lake, and we have Frank's Falling.
And they didn't get a trail in that, but Janeway Junction would have been natural.
All right. Let's see. Could you tell us a bit about how the lift towers were airlifted into place?
Yeah, I wasn't here then. That was 1961. I think I was 6. But from what I understand, there was a gentleman named Serge Gagarin, who was a friend of Frank's, and he lived over in Peru, and he was a bigwig at Sikorsky Aircraft, and we were late getting open. We had some pretty ambitious plans to open in mid-December. And Serge said, well, why don't we use some helicopters? And they brought all the towers to the parking lot, and Sikorsky set up their big copters, and it only took 2 days to put all the towers in place for those original lifts. But it was the first time that had ever been done at any ski area, and I think it's somewhat commonplace now.
Yeah.
All right. Here's a question. It's a bit of a long one, so bear with me. Could you mention a bit of the history of the Stratton Arts Festival? Hubert Schreibel was an integral part of the leadership team with Jesse Snyder, Eleanor Janeway, and Tink Smith's wife, all co-founders of the festival, and the ladies were wives of the co-founders of the ski area.
Right, so we can probably, Lee and I maybe can take that a little bit. The women you mentioned all got the Arts Festival going. Hubert stepped in as the director after a number of other artists kind of ran it. And Hubert's expertise obviously was in photography, but he did a masterful job in setting up the galleries in the base lodge. And it started only as like 1 week or 1 week, couple weekends, and it ended up being almost a month-long program in the base lodge for many, many, many years. And it was photography, art, sculpture, pottery. It was really a lovely thing. But like a lot of things, sometimes they run their course, and for some reason that did. But
I can't recall when it wrapped up.
Yeah. Can I ask myself a question?
Absolutely.
About, so there's one story we didn't get to that I think is kind of funny. So we've had a lot of celebrities here at Stratton over the years. We've been very blessed to have a lot of interesting people. Everybody from, Homer's Tommy Hilfiger and Susan Lucci to Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. We've had Alberto Tommo. We've had all kinds of interesting people.
Presidents.
But one of the most interesting was President Gerald Ford, who came here back in the 80s, and he was the, in the 90s, he was the head of the Stratton Vale Classic, and we had a party at the for the ski ball over at the tennis center. And so somebody, who shall remain nameless, it was not me, decided to turn all the lights out at the tennis center and bring out a big birthday cake. So I think the birthday cake was celebrating the Stratton Vale Classic, and have the president blow out the candles. So they turned out all the lights, and they brought the cake out, and President Ford made a little speech and blew out all the candles, and then they went to turn the lights back on, but they were the type of light that takes 15 minutes to come back on, and the Secret Service went ballistic. We all had to stand in place for 15 minutes and not move because it was entirely dark, because he'd already blown out the candles and there were no lights. And the person who made that decision to turn out the lights, I know who that is, but I am sworn. But it was pretty exciting, and once the lights came back on, then we all danced. And, yeah, we had a great time, and the Secret Service, kind of huffed and puffed, and then they left.
Can I love to add one? Sure. So when my parents had the Burton house, it was like a very small lodge, and Jackie Kennedy and all the Kennedys came up to ski, and they took over the whole lodge. And my mother just remembers Jackie Kennedy coming back into the kitchen and teaching my mother how to cook her eggs, because Mom was not cooking them correctly, and so she got behind the stove with Mom, right, Teeny? Ethel and Jackie did too, both of them, and so that was always one. We have that guest book with their names.
Yeah. So the Kennedy connection was a big connection, and that was something we thought about talking about. Most of the Kennedy family visited Stratton over the years. Jackie, John, and Carolyn came shortly after President Kennedy was assassinated, and Amo taught them to ski. Bobby and Ethel, as you say, stayed at the Burton house, and they skied with Tony Lechner as their instructor. Joan Kennedy came to the ski ball as a Cabot family guest, and she skied with Louis Lechner. And Ted and his family skied here for a long time, with their son Teddy skiing with Stefan. And later, their Kennedy granddaughter Kylie went to SMS as a snowboarder, and Bobby and Ethel's grandson Finn attended school here as a free skier. So we have quite the Kennedy connection.
All right, I've got a few more here for you. How many T-bars were there? And is the Poma lift still near the base of lift line?
Lee, the one who skis all the time, the Poma lift's gone.
Poma lift's gone. Yeah.
And
T-bars.
we don't have any T-bars now.
We did.
We did.
We have
Originally
three.
was a T-bar.
Yeah, we think there are 3 T-bars still functioning.
Really? No,
No,
not now.
no.
Originally.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I don't go over where the T.
He doesn't go to that side of the mountain. No, I think the T-bars are done.
The J bars are still here though, right?
How did the bear become the Stratton mascot / logo?
Oh, gee. Well, sure, I'll take that one. So when Tick and Frank were climbing up the mountain, doing their reconnaissance after the fateful midnight hike, they were laying out trails and that kind of thing. And they got up to the top, and a big flock of snow geese flew over the mountain, and they noted that and thought, well, maybe that would be a good symbol for the Stratton logo, would be a snow goose, because it was pretty attractive or whatever. And then as they were hiking down, they came to a couple of big trees that had been thawed by the bears, and of course the bear name
Menikna.
is
It's Menikna, which is home of the bear, is the actual Indian name of the mountain.
of Stratton. So it turned out to be, instead of the snow goose, it turned out to be the bear, which I think in hindsight is great, because that bear in the Stratton logo has gone from the standing bear to the bear head to the bear paw to the all kind of, we got every piece of that bear, and we still now have the bear paw. And I think it's great that we still have the bear, in spite of a few people along the way who thought we should change something. But we're going with the bear. It's worked for the first 60 years.
All right, I've got time for probably 2 more questions. What were the original 7 trails, and how long did it take to cut them?
Oh, that's a good question. I have to think
Standard.
Sun channel.
Some, the old one.
Tink's Lake and Old Smoothie.
Yep.
There's 5 on the bottom, 3 on the top.
Right.
How long it took to cut them? Well, they were done,
They happened quickly.
Yeah.
Tink got on the machine and there was no stopping him.
Okay, probably our last question of the evening. Was the clinic involved in COVID testing and vaccination?
Yes, absolutely. As the sort of world shut down in March of 2020, the clinic began COVID testing for the community, a free service for the community in November. And we're still testing today. We've had thousands of people come through our testing. So we felt like that was our role, to be supportive of the community in that fashion during that time, and especially for the resort and the resort employees and families. So yes, we've done a lot of it.
Great. Well, thank you. That is going to be it for questions. But before I close this out in my normal way, I'm just going to briefly pass this over to Lee, because I believe he wants to say a few words.
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Kimet for everything she's done to make this evening possible. Without her, it wouldn't have happened. Actually, without her energy and passion, many things here at Stratton would not have happened. She's pretty much devoted her life to the mountain in one way or another. The list is too long to recite here, but she's made an indelible mark and just about everything of importance that's happened here at Stratton over the last 15 years.
People are gonna think I'm old.
And yes, I do agree that's not possible. She started as a baby.
I started at age 15 here in 1969, so I was very young.
You're one of a kind, Kimet, and we love you.
Cheers to the Vermont Ski Museum. Thank you for coming up with this
Thank you for
idea
being
and
here,
inviting us
guys.
to participate.
Yes, well, thank you all so much for joining us. This was wonderful, and based on the chat and the questions, I know that the folks watching today really enjoyed it too. So thank you, Kimet. Thank you to our panelists. I also want to thank Myra Foster, Carson Thurber over at Stratton and Stratton Mountain School. You may not see them here on the panel, but they've put a lot of work in behind the scenes to bring the Red Bench to fruition. And we're grateful we could do this tonight. And thank you to all of you who tuned in tonight. As always, this is one of my favorite parts about my job is this Red Bench series. And I love doing this, you know, one Tuesday a month. It's been great. And please don't forget to make a donation. The warm and fuzzy feelings of supporting your favorite nonprofit is just a side benefit. You could win a pair of socks or a Stratton calendar. I'll draw those winners tomorrow. And we'll see you on the next Red Bench. We are doubled up for March, so just a couple weeks. Mark your calendars for March 31st. We'll have more information in our next e-newsletter about that. And that does it, folks. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Like,